My fellow Singaporeans, I am sure, like me, you were shocked at the figures released by the authorities yesterday for the coronavirus. We had 142 new cases. 72 of those were unlinked. And 98% of the new cases were local cases. So the situation in our country today is this. We have had 1,623 confirmed coronavirus cases, 7 deaths. But what is more worrying is the huge upsurge in recent weeks of unlinked cases. Now that suggests to me there is now quite widespread transmission of the virus in our community, contrary to what the Ministry of Health may want to claim otherwise. They keep telling us that there is only limited transmission. But I ask myself, how can that be the case when the number of unlinked cases keep going up every day, or almost every day? There may be some dips in some days, but the trend is upwards. Singapore is one of the few Asian countries where 2.5 months into the crisis, we have not seen a flattening or so-called planking of the curve. Rather, we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of new cases. Even China, the epicenter of the crisis, managed after the same amount of time to dramatically bring down the number of infections. And Wuhan, which has become synonymous with the crisis, is able, starting from tomorrow, to gradually lift some of the restrictions on the lockdown it imposed on the city. So by all accounts, my friends, this government has done a dismal job in the way it has handled the virus crisis. And yet it was not so long ago that the PAP leaders led by Hsien Loong was telling Singaporeans and proclaiming to the wider world what a wonderful job it was doing. And the Western press, some friendly journalists in the Western press and friendly academics in Western universities also heaped on the praise. And you had this group of Harvard University researchers, yes, Harvard University, who put up a study that suggested that Singapore had attained the gold standard in the way it handled the crisis. The mainstream media, which has always been the propaganda mouthpiece of the PAP, went to town with that. It told Singaporeans what a wonderful job the government was doing. But we in the People's Voice were not fooled. Right from the outset of this crisis, when no other party dared to challenge the government's approach to the way it was handling the crisis, we told Singaporeans the truth. We knew this government was taking Singaporeans down a path to disaster. We demanded that the public wear masks. We demanded that the borders be closed. We demanded that the government order work from home. We demanded that the government enforce strict social distancing. And isn't that what Hsien Loong did last Friday in a dramatic U-turn from the government's previous approach? And it proved us right. It is not easy for a political party to go against the tide, to swim against popular view. But we knew that as a credible and responsible opposition party, we had a duty to tell Singaporeans the truth and to hold the government of the day to account, especially in an important realm as public health. I am very proud of what People's Voice did. You know, the PAP lavishing praise on itself was to me similar to what a discredited British Prime Minister called Neville Chamberlain did in 1938 when he returned from negotiations with Hitler in Munich, waving a worthless scrap of paper and promising Britons that he had come back with a peace for our times, a peace with honor. And for a time, his popularity soared because a relieved nation thought that war had been averted. But there was a wiser soul in Winston Churchill who saw through the deal, opposed it, because he knew that it was a fake peace. And how right he was, because a few months later, in 1939, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia and World War II started. Mind you, my friends, Singaporeans pay for a very expensive cabinet. This cabinet costs Singaporeans $53 million a year. Now, according to the PAP, it is the creme de la creme of our society, stocked with scholars, generals, people of the highest academic qualifications. And yet, they have performed dismally in this crisis. Other countries pay far less for their cabinet members, far less for the government, but have been able to outperform us. I think we can safely say now that Singaporeans have fallen out of love with generals and scholars. And despite having done such a bad job in the handling of the crisis, this government now proposes to call general elections during the outbreak, compounding the problem. Now, over the last few weeks, I have heard arguments from all sides of the political divide on the pros and cons of calling a general election at this time. The PAP's argument is that they need a fresh mandate to carry out the tough measures to combat the virus. I have never heard such a fallacious and disingenuous argument. My friends, under our Constitution, a government is elected to a 5-year term. It is not elected to a 3-year or a 4-year term. Our Constitution recognizes no principle to suggest that a government's mandate or power reduces or lessens with the erosion of time. The government has the same mandate and power it does in the first year as it does in the last year of power. What the Constitution does allow is for the sitting Prime Minister to call elections when he thinks it is appropriate. Of course, that favors the incumbent Prime Minister. He can call it at a 3-year mark, he can call it at a 4-year mark. He can even call it 1 year after the last elections if he wishes to. Now, many countries that follow the Westminster model of government have done away with this advantage to the incumbent. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, since 2011, they have a so-called fixed-term Parliament's Act. What that means is that unless the Prime Minister and the government of the day can get a 2/3 majority in Parliament to approve elections, Parliament must run for its full 5-year term. That, of course, levels the playing field dramatically, because political parties can be certain of when elections are called. But where is the certainty in Singapore? And of course it is to Hsien Loong's advantage to keep the opposition guessing, which he is doing right now. And legislation just passed in the last week in Parliament have made that playing field even more uneven. New legislation mandates that people now cannot gather in public or even in social settings. So you are not even allowed to visit your family members if they do not stay with you. What that translates to is that in the upcoming elections, there certainly will be no rallies, there will be no house or community visits allowed by any political party. That means an even more unlevel playing field for the opposition, because everyone acknowledges that in this society, the mainstream media are the propaganda mouthpiece of the ruling party. But my friends, how can any decent politician or political party even suggest calling elections at this time? At least 47 countries have delayed their elections because of the coronavirus outbreak, because the risk of infection as a result of voting is real. It should not just be swept aside. And what the PAP would like people to believe is that they can make it safe. Where is the guarantee? Let me give you a very pertinent example. On the 21st of February, Israel detected its first COVID-19 case. On the 3rd of March, the legislative elections in Israel were held. Today, Israel, with a population of 9.2 million people, has 9,404 confirmed cases of coronavirus, with 73 deaths. How can Hsien Loong and the PAP leadership guarantee the safety and the health of Singaporeans if they have to vote? Will he be responsible if Singaporeans are infected as a result of voting? Will Singaporeans be able to claim compensation if they are so infected because of voting? What this crisis has revealed is that we have a government that is totally inadequate for Singapore. And it behooves you, my friends, in the coming elections, to elect representatives of Parliament who can look after your interests and put people first. Do not listen to those self-interested and selfish politicians who tell you that one-party rule is necessary for the success of Singapore. Neither should you listen to those politicians who tell you that only a two-party system is suitable for Singapore. In this modern age, the great democracies of the world, like Germany, like the United Kingdom, the Scandinavian countries, have shown us that it is multi-party democracies that function the best. And for a crisis like coronavirus, you need multi-party politicians to come together, work together, and devise the best solutions. So, in closing, my friends, I ask you to consider what I have said, and most importantly, I ask you to vote for a parliament that you and your next generation deserve. Thank you.